for joining me. I'm here in my rug hooking studio, and I have a footstool that has been hooked by a friend of mine. And when she started it years and years and years ago, I promised her that I would finish it for her. This is sort of an obscure pattern. It's one I've never seen and never seen hooked. It's a Kim Nixon pattern. Liz bought it probably about a year, maybe two before she passed. And luckily she bought the footstool and the feet, so I don't have to do any construction. So that part's the best. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Move this out of the way. And what I have here, see if I can see it on the overhead camera. There we go. What I have here is what I call my measuring tool. It's something that I give out at workshops. It's something you can order from my website. It's completely free. You just click it and add it to your cart when you're ordering something else. If you send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, I will mail you one back. I just don't mail them out without an order, generally. Okay. The only thing special about this is that it's got my website on here in case you would forget where to go, cindygay.com. And it's a special 1.25" measurement that I like to use for seam allowances on things like rugs and for the finished edge on a rug. The only thing tricky with a footstool is that you're going to have different seam allowances, okay? We're going to do the typical 1.25" right here. And what we'll do, and that cannot, let me tilt this down more. There we go. The cardboard, I'm snugging up right against the loops. I'm going to put my pencil in the ditch, and then I'm drawing a straight line. You don't want to use a ruler on fabric because while the ruler is straight, fabric is not. We want it to be in the straight of grain. So here we go. I'm going to do all the inside seams. Now to draw a line with the pencil on your fabric, this is rug warp, and I think it's the easiest to work with backing for the finishing process. I also love it for the hooking. I love the way it grips really tightly to the grippers. It's cheaper than linen. It's cotton, so you're probably not allergic to it. There's just a lot of good things about rug warp, and it does make the best footstools. So, and it also makes it easiest to draw a line like we're doing. I'm putting the pencil in the ditch. And what I mean by the ditch is in between two threads in the fabric. I'm going to put a finger down in front to anchor it, tilt the pencil in the direction I want to go, slight downward pressure, not real hard or you'll snap the lead. Now a tip that I got weekend before last, I was at the Solder annual winter hook-in, which if you haven't been to one of those, oh my God, it's wonderful. Dose of sunshine in February. It's a 2-day hook-in. We stretch it out to 3 days by going a day early. And we just sit and hook for all that wonderful time. But I had a footstool that I was working on, my little one from Solder that I started last year, and I'll show that to you probably later this week. And I did not have a pencil to draw these lines. I had pens, I had markers, but I didn't have a pencil. So I asked around, and Chris Hornsby was sitting at a table just beyond me, and she loaned me her pencil, and she used an ebony pencil. And that was wonderful because the ebony pencils are very soft, and it made that line very dark and very easily in the fabric. So I would recommend doing that. If you have to buy a pencil, I guess buy an ebony pencil. Okay, now I haven't drawn the seam allowance across the bottom. What I want to do is to leave a fair amount so that when the footstool gets wrapped around the footstool body and goes underneath and gets stapled, there's plenty of room. That is not enough room, particularly if once we get it on the footstool, there doesn't seem to be enough room and we have to hook more or whatever. So you don't want to cut it off until you know that you've got it pretty close. In fact, something I should have done right away, but let's back up and do it here anyways. This more. And I realize it's going to be hard to see this on the Google Hangout view, but when I splice this together with the overhead camera and upload it, it will be much easier to see. But what you want to do is size it. And by sizing it, I'm just checking to make sure it fits. I mean, weird things happen when people hook things. They end up different sizes than what they were drawn and kinds of stuff. All right, my gut right now is saying Liz did a really good job. Might be a little short this way because when I grab and put my fingers right here at the edge of the fabric and then I push down, no matter how hard I push, even if I lean on it, it's not quite getting to the bottom. Where this one, when I do that, I can just skim the top of the table. So I think I might have an issue on these two sides. And what I'm going to do, just so that I remember which ones they are, I'm going to mark the fabric. Okay, so I know that I need to be very generous in that bottom seam. And one thing I'm going to do with this that I haven't done personally with other footstools, and it's something that I've recommended to people, is that once you get the actual footstool sewn together and it's all set ready to go and you're just ready to do the part where you pull it over and start doing the stapling, stop yourself at that point and find an upholsterer and let them do that part. That becomes very familiar to them. That's how they do things every day. They're much better at it. They have all the supplies they need, and you won't have to run around and find the dust cover or the gimp, which is the trim to hide the staples. Let them do that. So that's what I'm going to do this time. But one thing I don't know personally is exactly how much space they like. So I'm going to leave a fair amount. I can always take it to them as a consult, and then if it turns out that I've left too much, I can take it back home and then I can re-zigzag and cut off the bottom even after it's sewn, so that they have the best possible thing to work with. So this has about 3 inches. It's probably overkill, but I'm going to leave 3 inches. And I know that one's right. That one's right. And that one's right. So the only side I really have to cut off is just this one side. So I'm not going to fuss too much about that. I'm going to get some scissors that are suitable for fabric cutting. And this is the part that gets scary for anyone doing a footstool, or if you are hooking a rug for the first time, this part where you actually have to cut it off. But we're just going to cut the edges. Nothing fancy here. So once this is cut off, rug warp is very easily frayed. I mean, you can take this and grab, and you can, pull out the threads incredibly easy. And while you're handling it, threads will fall out and you'll end up with a mess all over the place. So what you can do, and the way I solve that, is I will take this to the sewing machine, and right here on the edge, the sewing machine needle, I'm going to greatly exaggerate this, but it would go, let's use a pencil even. Your needle would go down on one side outside the fabric and then down inside the fabric the next time. So I set the zigzag to the widest one I have, and I just go back and forth, just capturing all those threads so that it stays tied together and it doesn't fall apart. And you'll want to do that pretty soon after you cut it off. You don't want to do a whole lot of handling until you've done that. In fact, on a large rug, I will often avoid cutting it all off until I'm ready to zigzag it, and I'll cut it off right kind of at the machine in front of me. Now, if you have a serger, you know, yay for you. I don't, and I know a lot of you out there might not have a serger. You can serge right on this line, and you can do basically what we're doing in several steps all at once. If you don't have a serger, and you don't have a sewing machine that'll do a zigzag, what I recommend is simply finding someone who does, and find a way to barter. I mean, it takes longer to set up the sewing machine than it does to actually sew the zigzag. So anyone who has a machine is going to be very happy to do that for you. I don't think you need to buy a sewing machine for rug hooking. I think the few times you need it, maybe a couple times a year. If you're one of those people that finish a rug a month, holy cow, but think about it. It's just a rug a month. And maybe every quarter you can get your zigzagging done. You could probably find, I would think, a tailor or someone who does alterations. They might be able to do that for you. Basically, anyone with a sewing machine can take care of that. So what I'll do next is I will do all that zigzagging all the way around so that it doesn't unravel. And then the seams will be sewn together. And I will do that probably tomorrow, because I will zigzag this off camera. You don't need to hear my sewing machine going. And then we'll sew this, I'll show you in bloody detail how I sew up the seams. And from there, it's only a day or two away from being finished. It depends on how many trips I'll have to make to the upholsterer to get it done. And I will need to put the finish on the Footstool feet. The feet that Liz has are unfinished, so I'll need to do that. I probably should start that today. It's going to take a couple of coats, so I'll need to let that dry. I would love to get this to her by Thursday, if I can. But there's the sewing machine, or the Footstool pattern. It's actually quite simple. Let me show you. I'll set this aside, and I will zigzag this later. But let me show you this guy. Let me turn this up so that you can see it a little bit better. This is the Footstool that I started at camp with Jane Hester. And here's the little guy on top. It's this wonderful primitive cartoon dog that my grandson drew. I'll probably develop maybe a couple patterns with Jackson, Jaksin, which is actually a pretty clever way of spelling it. It's not how we spell his name, but I'll probably develop some patterns with this dog in it because he's so cute. It's just so much fun. And all I really had designed when I went was this and the lettering, which is a tracing of Jackson's writing. And then I simply kind of winged it going around. And I worked really hard to be sure that I did not edit myself. If I felt like doing something, I just did it. I mean, here's like a little hill with some circle hit and miss. The colors don't make a whole lot of sense, but that's okay. I was experimenting with the side seam. This has a nice little detail coming up here and a little tricky bit here with the circle actually hooked right over the seam. And I can show you how that worked once I take this cover off. And then here's a leaf. Or is that the leaf? No, that's just another shape that I took the hit and miss up into. And another big flower. And oh, and this one, kind of cute, is a flower on the seam. I did not actually hook this stem until I had it all sewn together. And then I hooked it. Okay, so let me take this off. It's easier if I set it down here. This is not held on with Velcro. It's not done, there's not been anything done fancy to it. When I first bought this footstool, this is from IKEA. It's called Niels, N-I-L-S, $35. It comes in a box. The legs are not attached, but all you have are 4 bolts. That's it. So it's very simple construction. This is plain like this. This is just the quilt batting cover. Now, it's not a luxurious footstool. It doesn't have a huge amount of padding on it, but I think it's fine. What IKEA does is they sell a cover. I think it's about another $15. And you can get them in various colors, and they're $15. And it just comes down and it hooks on the Velcro. My initial intention was to do that, my cover the same way. But I ran into some logistic issues when it came to working around this part of the leg, which would coincide with the seam. I didn't want to cut into this so that I had this piece that would go over and catch the Velcro. Well, I remembered another little footstool that I made years ago. Where is that footstool? Let me go grab it. It's just outside. Okay, it's further away than I thought. That one's upstairs. But it's a little tiny footstool, and the sides on it are only probably 2 inches or so. And I made a cover for that with the idea, because the sides of it were wooden all the way around. I put stick-on Velcro. And then the idea was I was going to sew Velcro on the inside so that when I put it over, the Velcro would attach to the wood and the footstool would be fine. Well, what I found is when I slipped the footstool cover over the footstool, I didn't need anything else. That Velcro that was on the side was totally unnecessary because that cover went on and stayed on. So light bulb went off after I had this seam sewn, and I put the cover on there and I was playing with it, trying to figure out how I was going to get this to go up, turn under, and this to go this way without cutting it right where they met, because I knew that that would really weaken the cover. Then, luckily, sometimes simple is the hardest. It dawned on me that I just won't cut it. I will just make a cover like this that'll go down over it. Eventually what I'll do is I will either just stitch this down or cover it with rug tape if I'm feeling particularly ambitious. But I might just stitch it down because it'll never be seen once it's in there. So let's take a look at the side seams. And like I said, I will show you those in detail tomorrow. I'll have that ready to be sewn up. Here's the side seam, and the pattern has sort of like a little curve that makes this corner rounded, so you don't end up with the hard point right here at the corner. And that's what this weird little bit is, okay? And then there's my side seam. I opened up the side seam, and when I got ready to do the whipping, I was fussing with, I didn't want to make what's called a knife fold edge. A knife fold edge would have been just fold it back on itself and maybe just do a little tiny whipping. That's a finish that I do on my stair risers. But I also know that any place you take fabric and you fold it like that tight on itself, it makes a knife fold edge, and that's where it'll rot. Now, the rotting will take place based on time, not based on people walking on it or wear and tear. That's a time issue. So unless you can control time, it's going to rot at that first fold. So to avoid that first fold, many of you probably know that some of the older rugs were always finished with cording. There's a reason they used the cording. It wasn't just for looks. It was to prevent that knife fold edge. And the way you do that, you can imagine this marker is the piece of cord. You put that in the fabric, and then you wrap that fabric around the cording. There is no place on here where it's folded super tight. That helps to prevent the wear and tear on the edge and the rotting that occurs due to time. So what I did is I had some cording. It's not what I would normally use for rugs, but it's just fine. It's almost like a fleece. It's not going to do me like a good look. Remember if it had a cover on it. No, it doesn't even have a cover or anything else like that on there. It's just basically almost like a roll of fleece. But I knew it would work. You know, it's round, it's got some weight to it. And all I did was put it up under there and then whip around that, which of course left this kind of ugly edge. But at the time, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do that. And my biggest concern was here at the seam. If I folded this under and then whipped it, I would end up with however many layers here, and then a whole lot more of those layers here. So what would happen would be the whipping would get really fat and ugly at the corner. I didn't want that. So I'm using the cording. So that kind of controls the width of what the whipping is going to be. And when I got to this part, I think I finished at all the seams. Yeah. What I did when I got to the corner, I would pull back the backing, and where that roving sat within that ditch, I would take little tiny cuticle scissors, and from seam allowance, or from the edge of one seam to the edge of the other, I would just skinny down that little piece of cording, and then I would skinny it down again, and I'd skinny it down again until I could feel from one edge to the other, and I really couldn't feel in the weight of what that, oh, here's one that's not done. Oh, perfect. Oh, and I've already skinnied it down. Let me see if I can get you. See how thick that is here? And then when you come down here, it's much thinner. I've cut away a lot of that bulk so that when that gets turned down and I feel across that seam, I cannot, unless I look here, I really can't detect where that seam allowance is. So I'm sure that the thickness I get here is the same thickness I'll get over the seam. Might be a bit of a fussy thing, but works. And it made, I think, for a nice edge on the footstool. So I'm getting close. I picked this up. I got a bit here and a bit here. I started in one direction. I don't know. I think I started here, just randomly picked a spot and went. And then I realized, okay, I really want this where the two edges are. I really want to work up into that in case there's any movement in the cording. I didn't want to end up with the ripple someplace. So when I get to that, I'll make a seam by simply laying it in next to each other, cutting it, maybe leaving it a little bit big and then fitting it down and cutting it a little bit more and fitting it down until I end up with a nice progression that doesn't disappear. Now, if this had something, a lot of times you'll get cording and it'll be wrapped in almost like a mesh or some, you know, small threads, that type of thing. Then what I'll do is I'll take each seam, and I might end up doing it somehow with this, is I'll butt the seams together, but then I'll take a little bit of thread and bridge that gap. That makes it particularly good so that when you're doing the whipping, this doesn't get separated and you end up with a skinny spot in between. It helps it to stay together and to bridge the difference. So that's about it. Let me see if there's been any questions about, sorry, I have to sign back in. Okay, so no one's really asked any questions. So that's pretty much it for today. I'm only went 20 minutes, so I'm a little bit shorter than what I have been, but I want to check the video on this footstool that I cut the edges off on and make sure that the video is good before I move on, because I'd have to finish another footstool if I had to start over. So that doesn't work. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, I will have this footstool zigzagged and ready to go. And we'll start the actual sewing process. I'm not exactly how I'll do it. If I have to, I might have to wait till Wednesday when I have my new webcam, because I know I can get that up right into what I'm doing. But I'll fiddle with it tonight and see if I can figure out how I can get it up close so that you can really see what I'm doing here, and we don't have to rely on the overhead camera. This video will be edited down and condensed, and it'll show up as a blog post on rugcamp.com. So if you don't want to watch every day the long drawn out process, you can go to the blog and look for the current videos. It takes me a couple of days to get them edited and all the stuff I have to do to it, and then uploaded to where it needs to go, and then write the blog post. And I don't do it for every day. But if you want to see just the highlights, that's the place to do that. These recordings here that I'm doing now are recorded and end up on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube, look for Cindy Gay Rug Cooking, and you'll find my channel there, and that'll show you the list of all the videos that I've done so far, in the life stuff that happens, like a phone call in the middle of the hook in, or the dog barking, or me losing my hook, that kind of stuff. You'll see all that. It's meant more for you to turn it on, just sit down and actually hook with me. So that's it for today. Thank you to everybody who showed up, and I hope next time you feel brave enough to click the link and actually come on camera with me so we can talk. That would be wonderful. I'd really enjoy that. So for now, thank you, and I will see everybody tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.